You're listening to the Youngpreneurs Podcast, the #1 resource online for under 35-year-olds, where we chat twice a week to the most inspiring entrepreneurs in the world. We have it all. If you're looking for inspiration, guidance, or actionable tips to help you transition from that job into a business, or if you're ready to take that business to a whole new level, then this is the place to be. Get ready to live life on your own terms. Youngpreneurs, what's up? Welcome to another episode of the Youngpreneurs Podcast. I'm your host, Victor Penny, and thanks for joining us. You got the chance to spend your time with anyone, and you chose to spend it with myself and today's guest, Andrei Polgar, who is a serial entrepreneur, an exotic asset investor, and economist. He writes books, runs his own online TV show on YouTube, and he's been involved in a lot of different things entrepreneurial, so you're in for a treat. Welcome to the show, Andrei.
Thank you, Victor. Thanks for having me.
My pleasure. I'd love to give a bit of background about you, where you're from, and I guess what did entrepreneurship look like for you growing up?
I'm from Romania, and I was actually born in '89, which is the year in which Romania went from dictatorship to democracy. So strangely enough, my general upbringing had literally nothing to do with entrepreneurship because, I was raised by parents and grandparents who lived under communism, and the idea itself of, doing your own thing, being your own boss and so on, it was uncommon, let's just say.
And so I guess was schooling similar? I guess it is anyway that they don't really promote it, but was it discouraged when you were growing up?
I would say that yes. As I was growing up, the country was in a bit of a transitional period. Nobody really knew what needed to be done and so on. And the school system was, strangely enough, it was like any other school system out there. It was trying to get you to conform. But unlike the school systems of the Western world, you didn't have a working system to conform to. And it was actually what ultimately got me started as an entrepreneur. The fact that as of a certain point, I looked back and I said, look, this thing, like the status quo, at least the status quo of my country, this looks like a scam to me, there has to be something better than this.
And so I guess it's also that thing that it's a opportunity. Like there's this massive opportunity out there that your whole country isn't trying to be an entrepreneur, or not that any country is, but you've got this massive gap in the market where it's not getting filled by everybody because everyone's in this past mindset, which does take a long time to break for a lot of people.
Oh yeah, for sure. But strangely enough, in my country, kind of like in Russia, if you will, it's not like communism was replaced by what Westerners consider to be capitalism. It's rather that it got replaced by a, let's say, volcanic version of communism, in which the mentality of the average person is, even today, it's remarkably similar to how it was back when I was growing up. And that, again, even in 2017, when things have changed for the better in a lot of ways, but fundamentally speaking, the Romanian dream, if you will, is not being your own boss, starting your own business, and so on. It's just going to college, landing a quote-unquote comfortable position with the government if possible, getting a steady paycheck, and so on. So it's kind of like the opposite of the American dream, if you will, as envisioned by the founding fathers.
And so what were your first steps towards entrepreneurship then?
To be honest, I never really understood why I liked this thing so much, because literally nobody around me wanted to be an entrepreneur. Nobody around me cared about this stuff. Like, I remember at one point I was, I think, 12 or 13 years old. I taught myself HTML, and I was sure it's time to make money. So I took my grandfather. We went to various banks. PayPal wasn't accepted in my country back then. And we asked them, okay, I want to design websites. Please tell me how my customers from abroad can pay me. To which you can imagine the bank tellers of a formerly communistic country, they stared at me and, what is this guy smoking? Nobody had any idea what was going on. But I would say that the first step I took towards, doing my own thing was probably around sixth grade or so, when I taught myself HTML. That was the first step. And my fundamental shift when I said, look, I'm going to go all in on this, I don't think the status quo is going to work for me. That was, I believe, around 10th grade. Because, as a student, I'm a pretty competitive guy. I'm ambitious, if you will. So I tried to get good grades. I tried to do my thing. And each year I would qualify for what we call them national competitions. I was really good at foreign languages, at English and German. Yep. So there I was at one point at the nationals, if you will, and I was surrounded by smart kids, people who worked hard, who did their best. But it was ridiculous because the entire organization of the entire event was ridiculous. They hosted us in like horror movie level motels. I have no idea how to call them, where we had beds with kind of wooden boards below the mattresses, out of which half were missing, and showers without hot water, and so on and so forth. And that was, to me at least, it was my aha moment when I realized that this is a scam. I mean, here you have bright children who literally worked all day to become better at what they did. They were so excited. They were so hardworking. They had this amazing work ethic. And what did the status quo offer them? It didn't really offer them much. And at that point, I said, I'm going to do my own thing, A, because I like to, and B, because I'm sorry, but what I'm seeing is not a good solution.
Yeah. And so you started designing websites. How long did that go for? And was it successful? Or would you deem it successful? Should be probably the better question.
I never really started by making money per se by designing websites. I ended up actually making my first internet-related money, if you will, by leveraging my English skills, because I used to. It's actually the first job and the only job I had, which was writing articles in English for some guy who, he worked with a bunch of freelancers, me included. We made 70%, and he kept 30%. That was basically my first experience with this internet thing. And then one thing led to another. I said, look, thanks for the experience. I was making good money, but I wanted more. I wanted to do my own thing. So I started my own business. Again, I started with articles in English. Then I built a steady pool of customers, people who trusted me, people to whom I could say, okay, if you want a website design, then you can contact me, and I'm going to offer that. I offered them design services as well eventually. Then I moved on to hosting. Then I moved on to various other projects. But it all started, if you will, with article writing, for me at least.
Yeah, that's cool. So you started your own hosting companies, did you, off the back of that?
Since I had a pool of customers, since I was also blogging as of a certain point, and I had a lot of people who trusted me, who knew that if I'm going to start something, I'm going to have a good work ethic, I'm going to give them a good deal. So I ended up starting I actually started 3 hosting businesses. They were really small time services. And that basically gave me the opportunity to see the internet under the hood, if you will. The money wasn't great. The best advice I have for those who are thinking about starting a hosting business is don't. But it does give you some good insight into how the internet works, with the good, the bad, and the ugly. So I think that as an entrepreneur, it helped me tremendously, even if not necessarily because it was the most profitable project in the world.
Yeah. And I mean, the reason I asked that is it's kind of even now, it's a fickle industry, hosting. People don't understand it. The general person doesn't understand it. They understand they need a host, and they don't. Yeah, they'll go, okay, well, if I only need a host, I might as well go for the cheapest. And
yeah, this is basically what I did. I quickly realized that racing people to the bottom is not the best idea in the world, because The good thing about my customers was the fact that they were pretty internet savvy, so they didn't need a lot of hand holding. And for about 5 years, I offered them, I would say, some great value for their money, because if I recall correctly, yeah, they paid me 98 cents per month for hosting. And a lot of times they were complaining about how their VPS at Wiretree was down, but my cheap hosting had perfect uptime. And I think over those 5 years, maybe we had 3 instances of serious downtime. But again, the money wasn't great because there's only so much wiggle room when you're racing to the bottom. You need to you need to move beyond that, because otherwise it's, you're never going to get out of the peanut gallery, so to speak.
Yeah, which is a great learning for a lot of people, because they think that they should start off trying to undersell competition, and then that just creates this. And I mean, I'm not the economist here, but it creates this terrible ecosystem where you can't price yourself at a premium, you can't have decent margins, and you've got to have a very, very good model to be the known cheap person. You can't be the person trying to compete with the one who's regarded as the cheap person.
Exactly. And on the internet, I always tell people that, okay, it's harder to start now than it was 10 years ago, but I can promise that it's easier now than it's going to be 10 years from now. So it may be true that there are no longer, extremely low-hanging fruit on the internet like it used to be, but still, it's not an environment in which you have to race people to the bottom. The internet, the commercial internet, as we know it, started probably around 96 or so. Again, the commercial internet,
Yep.
So we're talking about something extremely young, Maybe in a very, very mature industry, you have no choice, but those are different discussions. If you're here right now on the internet, then you have to innovate, you have to develop an edge, you have to do something that goes beyond just selling hosting for 98 cents a month,
Yeah. And what takes the majority of your time now?
Well, I would say that right now I spend the majority of my time writing, and writing, which means creating scripts for my YouTube channel, which means working on my upcoming book, which means working on my blog that I've had for about 8 years or so. And I call myself a pretty peculiar guy, in that you don't come across someone every day that's a Romanian from the middle of nowhere who turned writing in English into a career. It is kind of atypical.
Yeah. It's very most people have enough fear about starting their own blog or their own YouTube channel in their own language, let alone a second language. So kudos to you. So are those your main income generating sources?
Actually, no. I would say that in terms of income generation, few things have done better for me than investing in domains. To me, it came natural because I started out as a service provider, and then one of my customers told me that, okay, you know what, I'm a professional domain investor, and it didn't surprise me all that much, because again, I realized that why not? It makes sense that a good domain is going to be worth a lot of money.
Yeah.
And fortunately, it turned out that I was pretty good at it. And even now, you cannot compare the opportunities I have as a domain investor in terms of strictly the money you generate. You cannot compare it to writing books or starting a YouTube channel. I always tell people, if you're in it for the money, then don't write books, don't start YouTube channels. These are occupations that are vocational in nature. If you're doing it for the money, you're going to be disappointed. You're better off investing in domains. There's plenty of money to go around for everyone.
Yeah. So for those out there who aren't familiar about domain investing, do you want to give them a quick overview?
Sure. I mean, it is pretty straightforward. It's not. It's ultimately all a matter of acquiring desirable assets, and you make your money on the buy. I for one am pretty good. I do tend to be a cheap bastard, so I'm naturally pretty good at the acquisition front, and that I tend to be talented at buying really good domains for cheap prices. I'm not as good at selling, but just like in any other industry, you learn a thing or two, you read about what others have done, what they did right, what they failed with, and so on, and you're going to find your little corner of the industry in which to make money. So I think there's enough opportunity in domains for everyone right now. But that being stated, again, don't forget to also follow your dreams, do what you like, and so on. Because the natural question to ask yourself is, if investing in domains is such a moneymaker, then why would you write books? Why would you publish videos on YouTube? Why would you do this stuff? And to me, at least, the answer is that writing books and publishing videos and teaching others, this is what keeps me hungry. This is the main difference between someone who I think is on the right track and someone who isn't, is the fact that you always have to be hungry. And life has taught me that you can be hungry for two reasons. One, because of necessity, because personally I've been in situations in my life, you can imagine, as someone from Eastern Europe, where I had no choice but to do well financially. It's not like I was given the option to fail.
Yeah.
So necessity, that's definitely something that keeps you hungry. But the problem with necessity is that it's not sustainable. It's not a sustainable model. You can do it for a month. You can do it for 6 months. You can do it for a year, but you're going to burn yourself out. So to me, at least, the number one most effective way that I know to keep myself hungry is simply to do what I like. And at certain points in your life, in your career, and so on, this means saying no, leaving some money on the table so as to focus, if you will, on the big picture.
Yeah. So not trying to screw a deal down that's going to make you unhappy when it gets drawn out. Just cut your win and get into the things that you do love, which is a very, very smart and wise word. So you work on your YouTube channel, and I want to get a bit of an insight here. So 1 Minute Economics, what is like, if you were to tell people a bit about it and kind of where the inspiration came from for that, I think there'd be a lot of value in that.
Well, I am an economist by trade, if you will, and I've noticed in my country, when interacting with others as well, that economics is not being taught properly in school. It's not being taught properly at the university level either. And in my opinion, at least, everyone should know their basic economics. And knowing your basic economics means more than just knowing the difference between inflation and deflation. And most people don't even know that, So because at the end of the day, a financial crisis appears. These things affect you. It's not like you can just stick your head in the sand and hope that nothing's going to happen, because economics is all around us. And even when we don't think that we're making economic choices, we're actually making them.
Yeah.
Now, at the same time, I do realize that you, for example, you're busy with your own stuff. Other people have their jobs or their projects, their occupations, and so on. And in this day and age, when people are bombarded with information and everyone wants their attention and so on, it would be hard for me to say, hey, I'm going to teach you economics, but please give me 1 hour of your time each week.
Yep.
People aren't going to give me 1 hour of their time each week because it's too important for them. So what I decided to tell them instead is, no, give me 1 minute of your time 2 times per week, and I'm gonna promise you that you are going to become ridiculously good at economics. I don't need more than a minute to show you, to teach you the things that I believe everyone should know. So this is how it started. It started with this value proposition of mine towards the average individual. And strangely enough, it turns out that economists, economic students, and so on, they loved it. A lot of my traffic is coming from universities, from students. For example, 10 days ago, a professor from the largest university in the UK just told me that she's going to be using my videos for her classes and so on. I always encourage other economics professors to do the same, and it's working, because again, time and time again, even with my own colleagues from college and so on, the way in which economics in particular is being taught, but we can extrapolate and refer to many other fields as well, is just not working. The model of memorizing definitions, passing your exam, getting your degree, and then having something to keep your fire working with, that no longer works, which is why I personally, and this is what I'm doing for economics, but I think people can do it for other fields as well. I believe in explaining rather than telling people to memorize, and I think this is what ultimately sets 1 minute economics in particular apart.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's half the problem with the conformed education, is how well can you memorize as much as you possibly can and then forget it once you've been tested on it, and then get the qualification that says that you know everything about that, whereas the actual understanding and implementation is where it actually where the rubber meets the road, so to say. And I'm flicking through here, you got some very, very cool animations in your YouTube channel, and looks like there's some very in-depth, or not in-depth topics, but obviously in a minute and a half, but very poignant topics that a lot of people need to know about.
Oh yeah, like for example, look, I think people need to know, for example, how our banking system works, and I did that by teaching them what fractional reserve banking is, and it's one of my reasonably popular videos. I did it in a minute or so, and it worked. Even for something, when people hear fractional reserve banking for the first time, their initial reaction is to just run for the hills.
Yeah.
But these, fundamentally speaking, economics isn't complicated to understand. I've explained derivatives, which caused, to a decent enough degree, the Great Recession that we all know about. I've talked about fractional reserve banking. I cover a lot of, like you've mentioned, I cover a lot of topics that seem complicated, but they're not. It all depends on your ability to get the message across in a way that's easy to understand. When researching for my videos, when seeing what's around on the internet and so on, time and time again, I end up reading definitions. I end up reading the very thing that I know is going to make people look the other way and lose interest. Just a lot of the most complicated things in life, in economics at least, I can confirm, as long as you explain rather than make people blindly memorize, it's going to work. This is why I started the channel, because I have something that didn't work, in my opinion, the way in which economics was being taught, and I said, look, let's find a way to make it work. And this 1 minute concept is, in my opinion, more than enough.
Yep. Yeah, it's creating a solution to a problem is always going to win out in the long run, which is awesome. And I've just hit subscribe and am going to
welcome aboard.
Yeah, gonna jump into it, because I think like you say, getting things distilled down for me in a minute or so, it means is when I do have that time, I can either binge watch or I can listen to those couple of minutes in the morning while I'm having my breakfast, and hopefully learn something new that's going to benefit me. I think understanding more about the economics of how the world works is something that is constantly changing now, but is also hugely important if you're going to be an investor in particular, and know the trends that are coming, and how to deal with them and what influences them as well. So a lot of people are very naive to the things that actually really control our outcomes.
Victor, the average person is vulnerable. The average person, look around you, your friends, your family members, and so on. The average person is just, each person is living in his own little bubble where you wake up, you go to work, you create your own little universe, and for a while it works. But what happens if, maybe it's going to be another financial crisis, maybe it's going to be a geopolitical event, and so on. People aren't accustomed to thinking for themselves. People aren't accustomed to keeping their ears on the ground and being interested in things that don't necessarily have to do with putting food on the table or stuff like that. So the average individual it scares me just how fragile the average individual is. And a lot of this fragility stems ultimately from ignorance, from the fact that we are not willing to pay attention to things that affect us, because whether we like to or not, when the next crisis is going to hit, for example, nobody's going to care that you have an important meeting, or it's not like the crisis is going to call you on the phone and ask if your schedule is okay and if it can come. It's going to come regardless, and there is strength in knowledge. And a lot of times it's not like we have to become economics buffs. It's not like we have to become health buffs and so on. We don't have to become experts, but we do have to learn how the world around us works, how to stay healthy, how to get out of. We do have to know these things. But again, the average individual is so entrenched in the rat race, if you will, that he just doesn't care. He just doesn't care. And I think it's a shame.
Yeah, it is a shame, and often, unfortunately, ignorance is bliss, which a lot of people are just happy to keep ticking along, and then they'll blame things that, they'll play the victim and say, well, I didn't know this was going to happen, and I didn't know how to deal with this, and I didn't know I shouldn't have done this, and which is a very, very unfortunate situation that we live in, an unfortunate but true situation that we live in. So I'd recommend, I've just been flicking through a few of these, of the topics that are on your channel, and I'd highly recommend everyone checks out youtube.com/1 minute economics, because there's a ton of valuable information which is going to help everybody out there on their journey. I want to just wrap up with a couple of kind of personal, quick fire questions. What does your usual day look like? Is there such a thing?
I've written this in my book as well. My regular day just revolves around doing things that make me happy, because the things that make me happy keep me hungry, and the things that keep me hungry, they keep me on the right course. Now, personally, I would definitely say that my average day is atypical, especially if you can compare me to the average 9-to-5 person. But at the end of the day, the most important thing is that it works. I can count the times I put a suit on throughout a year. I can count those times on two hands,
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, the only thing that matters is one simple question. Whatever it is you're doing, does it work for you? Yes or no? If the answer is yes, great. If the answer is no, do something differently.
Yeah. And if you were to recommend two books or resources for young entrepreneurs to have a look at, what would they be?
Well, my number one book recommendation tends to always be a bit of an oldie, but a goldie in my opinion, which is The Intelligent Investor by Benjamin Graham, a book that's highly recommended by Warren Buffett, by a lot of really, really brilliant people. And it's not so much a book strictly about economics, about investing. Because, okay, that is the topic of the book, but I consider it perhaps the number one resource in terms of financial mindset, in terms of just adopting a proper way of thinking, and ultimately a coherent way of looking at life. And the second book I would recommend. And I'm going to recommend it primarily because I really like the guy who wrote it. It's Choose Yourself by James Altucher. I'm sure you've read his blog a few times, and yep. I think he's a guy who has value to add. He's the type of person who is willing to say the things that other people aren't. It always bugs me how on the internet everyone goes on and on about their winners. In every industry out there, you're going to find people who are going to brag about the things they did right, about how amazing they are, about how good they are, and so on. But there are only so few people out there who are willing to genuinely share their losers, genuinely talk about going through depression, losing everything, feeling worthless, and genuinely deep stuff. I think there's value in that, and for this reason, I think that people like James Altucher need to be supported at the end of the day.
Yeah, I think they share a valuable, true message where a lot of this, particularly online world we now live in, is just full of shit. And I remember reading one of James's posts about how he got rid of all of his possessions and just lived out of a bag for, I don't know, like 3 or 6 months or something like that. It was just really, he just realized, even though he's very, like you're saying, transparent, also how full of shit he was, not to other people, but to himself, with what he really needed to get by. So he has very poignant and meaningful messages from the things that I have read of his, and obviously is a very well respected author. So, final question, just to wrap up. 2 years' time, where are you? What are you doing?
Well, I hope that in 2 years' time, I'm going to keep doing what I'm doing right now. And what I'm trying to do right now is just try to eliminate noise from my life and focus on writing. Focus on economics, focus on writing books, focus on growing the channel, focus on doing the things I consider meaningful. Because, whenever I try to take personality tests or anything along those lines, it's pretty consistent that I do have the personality type of a teacher, if you will.
Yeah.
So this is where I derive happiness from. This is where I derive a deep sense of meaning from. Just throwing work out there, being proud of what I'm doing. And I do hope things are going to continue in this direction. I do hope that, gradually, I don't want to be one of those people who just goes on and on about how awesome he is, because, right now, if I were to have to support my family just through writing books and just through the income generated by the YouTube channel, it would not be a very comfortable life, let me tell you. And in all honesty, I do hope that 2 years from now, I'm going to be able to focus just 100% on the things I love doing, on getting better at the things I love doing, without having to worry as much about what's going to pay the bills, what's going to put food on the table, what's going to support the family, and so on.
Yeah. No, that's cool. So thank you so much for your time, and welcome to the Youngpreneurs family. If people want to find out more about you, if they want to check out more of not just the 1 minute economics, but the other things that you've got going, where can they go and what can they do?
Well, if people want to get in touch with me, I gladly answer questions or interact with them. They can find me on youtube.com/1minuteeconomics. If they go to the About section of the channel, they're going to find my email address, so they can reach out. They can also check out the website of my book, which is wealthmanagement2.com. They can also check out the contact section on that website and shoot me a message. I can also be found on social media. You can find me at twitter.com/Andrei Polgar, or you can also find me on LinkedIn, where I'm pretty active. So if you're interested in what I'm doing, if you've listened to this podcast and you think there's something I can help with, please get in touch in any way. You can even leave a comment on one of my videos and so on. Maybe leave your email address or something like that, and I would gladly get and stay in touch.
Awesome. So we will link all of that at passiveincomeyoung.com. Again, thank you so much for your time. Really appreciate it, and look forward to following you via your YouTube channel and keeping in touch.
Thanks again for having me, Victor. Have a great day, guys.
Thanks for listening to the Youngpreneurs podcast. This was proudly brought to you by the Podcast Institute, the #1 training resource to take your business from chasing leads to leads chasing you, and from an absolute amateur to a full-blown authority. If you're looking to take your business to the next level, then a podcast is the obvious answer. You can get national and global exposure in a very fast time, and it's just exactly what I've done with this podcast. So if you want to find out more, get a checklist on how you can get started for under $60, and to find out more through a small training video that I've prepared for you all, then please check out passiveincomeyoung.com/podcast training.